All right, so I got some great news here for any fans of rampant corruption, sexual harassment, or needlessly sacrificing grandparents at the altar of COVID, because former disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo is apparently already trying to make his political comeback. So, here from the New York Times, they say Cuomo reemerges and blames cancel culture for his fall. Cancel culture. Okay, I seem to remember a couple other things that sort of played a role in his inevitable resignation, but let's just go ahead and hear what he had to say. They say, former Governor Andrew M. Cuomo emerged from his self-imposed exile on Sunday using his first public appearance in more than 6 months to cast himself as the victim of cancel culture and to vow to reinsert himself in New York's political discourse. So again, painting himself as the victim, not the women that he sexually harassed or the nursing home patients that he sacrificed at the altar of his his campaign contributions from nursing home executives. None of those people are the victims in this situation. It's actually Andrew Cuomo who's somehow the victim in his mind because of a cancel culture woke mob who was trying to hold him accountable for his actions. Wow, radical, I guess. But again, another interesting way that they phrase this up here, self-imposed exile? Self-imposed? I'm sorry, are we already forgetting the context of when Andrew Cuomo actually ended up resigning? He was pushing this to the very end. He was literally having some of his staffers go out and try to smear the women who were accusing him. This is the actual context of his resignation. They say, again from the New York Times, the resignation of Mr. Cuomo, age 63, a 3-term Democrat, came 1 week after a report from the New York State Attorney General concluded that the governor sexually harassed nearly a dozen women, including current and former government workers, by engaging in unwanted touching and making inappropriate comments. And the 165-page report also found that Mr. Cuomo and his aides unlawfully retaliated against at least one of the women for making her complaints public and fostered a toxic work environment. And they also say the report's findings put increased pressure on Mr. Cuomo to resign, even with President Biden, a longtime friend, advising him to do so. And it spurred the state assembly, Mr. Cuomo's last political bulwark in an Albany increasingly arrayed against him, to take steps towards impeachment. So, in other words, the actual context that led up to his resignation was the threat of impeachment, the literal president of the United States within his own party telling him to resign, and a report that came out from the New York Attorney General that was stating that he sexually harassed a dozen women. Okay, that's the actual context of his resignation, not exactly a self-imposed exile as if he was like looking out for the good of the people. Completely insane way to phrase that. But they continue saying, speaking at God's Battalion of Prayer Church, a black congregation in Brooklyn, Mr. Cuomo defiantly told a sparse collection of about 100 congregants that he wanted to tell my truth, describing cancel culture as a frightening form of extremism and claiming he had been vindicated in the months since he resigned in August following a string of sexual harassment allegations. Don't exactly know what the fuck he means by vindicated. Haven't seen absolutely anything other than actual charges not being brought against him that could possibly lead him to think that he was vindicated, but none of that has anything to do with the valid accusations that were made against him by multiple different women on multiple different occasions. And also, none of that has to do with the nursing home situation, which was, at least in my opinion, the primary reason why he should have been impeached and removed from office and then criminally held responsible for a lot of those deaths that he directly caused as a consequence of his own corruption. But they continue saying the remarks marked more heavily by the blame he placed on others for his downfall than by a display of contrition were the most robust effort yet by Mr. Cuomo in his attempt to rehabilitate his reputation and salvage his legacy after his decade-long reign as the governor ended abruptly in disgrace. And they say they came as Mr. Cuomo had been weighing how he might re-enter public life. It's only been 6 goddamn months. I mean, I feel like we just shook this guy off and he's already trying to make his comeback. And they say last month, he began spending $369,000 from his campaign account, which had more than $16 million, according to the latest filings, on a barrage of television advertisements that portrayed him as a victim of politically motivated attacks. So again, this is not just some rumors that maybe sometime in the future he's going to try to re-enter public life. This is happening right now. He is literally paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to run advertisements on TV, pretending as if he's been vindicated. He has not been vindicated on pretty much any of this, okay? So they continue down here saying, Mr. Cuomo, conveniently, did not delve into the specifics of the allegations made against him by numerous women, including former government employees, which included instances of inappropriate comments, touching, kissing, and in one instance, groping the breast of a former aide. And as he has before, he portrayed his conduct towards women as a result of shifting generational norms, saying he may have been old-fashioned and out of touch. I don't think that was the problem, Cuomo. I think the problem was maybe you were a little bit too in touch with people who didn't want to be touched by you. And he added that I've learned a powerful lesson and I paid a very high price for learning that lesson. Did you? I mean, did you really learn a lesson here? Did you really pay a high price here? Because how the fuck are people supposed to believe that you learned a lesson if your entire point in making your political comeback is that you didn't do anything wrong? He's saying, I learned my lesson, I paid a high price. What, you went into exile for 6 months after being completely forced out of office in disgrace? That's your high price that you paid? You sexually harassed multiple women. You are directly responsible from your corruption for thousands of nursing home deaths, okay? You didn't pay any price. Okay, you got off easy, and now you're trying to make your political comeback and not even admit that you did anything wrong. That's not learning your lesson, okay? So again, completely delusional, but just to give you guys a reminder of exactly the type of shit that Cuomo was involved in that inevitably led up to his resignation, reminder here from David Serrata, all the way back in May of 2020, okay, towards the beginning of COVID. They say Cuomo gave immunity to nursing home executives after big campaign donations. So he gets large donations. These are one of the biggest sources of his donations for his campaign coffers was nursing home executives. And so he turns around after getting what is effectively a bribe from these executives. And at the beginning of COVID, he gives them a shielded immunity from any lawsuits from people who might be saying, hey, these conditions that my grandma or grandparent or parent is living in at these nursing homes is not safe. They are not protecting them adequately from COVID. Andrew Cuomo gave them shielded liability from those potential lawsuits because they gave him campaign contributions. Now, another part of this was his policy choice to basically just ship COVID-positive nursing home patients back into these homes in completely unsafe ways that verifiably led to excess deaths in those nursing homes. So again, complete corruption. And then after this happened, Cuomo aides rewrote the nursing home report to hide the higher death toll. So corruption, bribery, then poor policy decision-making that kills people needlessly, and then a subsequent cover-up after the fact. Okay, so again, brazen corruption and deadly corruption, but this is exactly who Andrew Cuomo is. And on top of this, just to slap everybody in the face, while this was happening, while he was going on CNN with his brother Chris Cuomo, who has also since been fired in disgrace, thankfully, from CNN, going and doing all of these fluff piece interviews where he's pretending like he's going to be the next big presidential figure to take on Donald Trump, and he's the guy that the Democratic Party should be trying to emulate. After doing all of this, and after sacrificing nursing home patients to the altar of COVID and his executive donations to his campaign, after all of this, or while all of this was happening, he was writing a fucking book about how well his leadership was during the pandemic, okay? And again, as you can see here, he had to give back the $5.1 million he made off of the book that he didn't even write. So again, Andrew Cuomo is an absolutely objectively horrible person who should be shunned for the rest of his life, arguably. I mean, if he actually was coming out and demonstrating that he did learn a lesson, that would be, I guess, maybe a slightly different situation. I still think, 6 months out, maybe a little bit too soon to be trying to make your political comeback here, guy. But, on top of that, he clearly didn't learn anything. I mean, he's still in denial that he did anything wrong. His justification is like, literally, well, what am I supposed to do? Hey, I'm an Italian, we get a little bit of touchy here. No, you sexually harassed people, okay? You groped a former aide, okay? This is not stuff that you can just brush off as like, well, I guess I'm Italian and we're a little bit handsy over here, and then say that you didn't learn your lesson, okay? So again, he needs to be shunned, disgraced, absolutely cannot be allowed to make his political comeback. I mean, Jesus Christ, I feel like we only just barely managed to get rid of this guy, and he is already, just months later, not even a year after all of this shit came out about him, trying to make his political comeback. Absolutely cannot be allowed to happen.